So we are at the end of the course content-wise, so nothing new to learn. Might have to relearn a few things, but might have to remember what you thought you tried to forget. But it's that time of the term again where you get to exercise your freedom of self-expression. And again, just like we handled the midterm, the final will be handled very much the same way in the same format. I will, if I've not done it already, I will send out an email talking about when the final will be open, how long we'll have. Typically, we'll give 2 hours, and when the final will be closed. I'll give you a window of time to take that. I'll also ask you the same thing in terms of that no help statement. You know, get that, put your name on it, email it back to me, or put it in the Dropbox. So for just a few minutes, I want to talk about both format and content. You know me well enough by now. I'm going to talk about format first. I'm not even going to ask you this time because you're going to say what I want you to say anyway. So, format and content. Final exam. Here it is. Any questions? Are you waving at me? Like a parade wave? Okay, here we go. Looks like this. You probably can't zoom in on it good enough. 5 pages, 30 items. There's no data analysis to be done per se. You know, you don't have to use SPSS for anything. We've got other assignments and plenty of those for you to do. Just some things that basic things that you just ought to know after having a course like this. Out of those 30 items, the first 25 are multiple choice. And again, it's not, and by multiple choice, as you've seen on the midterm, it's not just memory stuff. It's stuff you got to think about and figure out. It's just not that I'll ask you maybe how to interpret something, or again, I might ask, I may give a scenario and ask what type of test you would use for that. So multiple choice for 25. First 25, the last 5 are, again, short essay, short answer, saying the same thing again. Do not write me any big, long, nasty essays. You don't want to write them. I don't want to read them. Instructions are respond to each item. No response should require more than a short paragraph. Do not use examples in class or the textbook. So if I ask you for an example or something, it's kind of like I don't let you do the APA write-up for the APA write-up I've done for you. So give me. I want you to be able to come up with examples if I ask you about something. And you know what those are going to sound like. They're going to sound just like the other ones. So that's the format. The content, things we talked about. Just kind of throwing topics out here. We talked about levels of significance. Sometimes we call those alpha levels. The fat fish, yes. Like we're going to analyze data typically at the 0.05 level of significance or at an alpha level of 0.05. Those terms are kind of interchangeable. We talked about critical value and calculated value, like for example, critical value of T or F. From those critical values come from the table in the back. Tables in the back of the book. You don't need critical values when you're doing it with SPSS. So the question is always, is your calculated value, I don't care if it's FT or whatever, is your calculated value larger than the critical value? If the calculated value is larger than the critical value, then your p-value is less than the alpha level. Did you follow that? You followed it, but say it again. Okay. If your calculated statistical value, whether it's T or F or whatever, if your calculated value is larger than the critical value, coming from the back of the book, if your calculated value is larger than the critical value, your p-value is less than the alpha level. Then you say p is less than 0.05. But with SPSS, we don't need critical values because SPSS spits out a more specific p-value. It'll tell us that P is equal to 0.042. Oh, okay, well that's significant because it's less than 0.05. Okay, the calculated value is the value of whatever the letter according to the test you're going to use, like a T value, or if you're doing an analysis of variance, you get an F value. One topic we started talking about the first half of the course, and we kind of bridged over to the second. We talked about confidence intervals. So we just kind of gave an introduction to confidence intervals. We fleshed that out a little more once we got in the second half of the course. Confidence intervals, like if our mean is 75 and we've got is plus or minus a certain number of points. It's like the political polls where you see the president's approval rating is 40% plus or minus 5, which means it's probably somewhere between 35 and 45. That's a confidence interval. It's a real world confidence interval. We've talked about degrees of freedom as they apply to these statistical tests. Again, we introduced the term in the first half of the course, but we used it a lot the second half of this course. And you've already asked this question, but let me ask it again and answer it again. Nobody's asked just now, is the final comprehensive? And the answer is yes and no, probably know what you mean, but you still have to know some things about, you have to know what a mean means, where it comes from. So we didn't introduce the term here, but those things are still foundational, so some of those things are still, they're just a part of the content as it's applied in the more advanced topics in the course. Mitch, I've got a couple things about degrees of freedom here. We talked about directional, non-directional tests, or 1 and 2 tail test. A 1-tail test is the same as a directional test. A 2-tail test is the same as a non-directional test. Question was to say that again. Was that say that again about the critical value and the calculated value? Is that what you're asking? Okay. If you're using the table in the back of the book, and we didn't much, but we did with a little bit with some of these procedures. If you're using the table in the back of the book, you crank out a value of, let's say, T. If the value, okay, I did say that. Let me finish up in it one more time. If the value you crank out is higher than the number you get from the back of the book, that's the critical value. Then you've got some significance going on. Question, you don't have any questions that require you to use the table. Yeah, I expect you to memorize the table. I'm just kidding. No. If I ask you to do something like that, I will give you what the table would say. Yeah. Yeah, you have to memorize all those critical values, especially the ANOVA table where you got the two F variances and all that. We've talked about, mentioned significance. We talked about hypotheses, especially null hypotheses, and when you reject them, when you don't reject null hypotheses. We've talked about t-tests. That was our first kind of set of procedures we talked about, the 3 different kinds of t-tests, a single sample t-test, an independent sample t-test, and a paired t-test. I gave you about half a dozen different names for the paired t-test. Generally I'll stick with the word paired. Yeah. Okay. But we use words like related and matched and, kind of, but yeah, paired is kind of I think it's the best one because it's the most inclusive, yeah. Again, a couple of scenarios where I give you some information, ask you a question, and just ask what you would use. I don't ask you to carry the test, I just ask you which test you'd use. And there are examples like not the same ones that we've used in class, but the same kind of examples. For example, know when you use what kind of t-test, know when you'd use an ANOVA. Speaking of ANOVA, you remember we have variance and degrees of freedom, two different kinds, between groups and within groups. With ANOVA's analysis of variance, you have two different kinds of variance and two different kinds of degrees of freedom. You have between groups and you have within groups. Keep in mind in ANOVA, and I'm looking at a couple of different questions for ANOVAs. Keep in mind that ANOVA is one or two steps. That goes back to my illustration of asking the first question, what time is it? If the answer is no, you're finished. If the answer is yes, you've got another question to ask. So with the ANOVA, the first thing you find out, is there a significant difference somewhere? If there's not, you're finished. If there is, the next question to be answered is, okay, where? Also in terms of rejecting or not rejecting nulls, we talked about common and rare occurrences. Typically, if it's common, we illustrate that by shading the middle, the big part under the normal curve. If it's rare, we shade the far end of one or both tails, depending if it's directional or not. Rare goes along with being significant and rejecting the null. Yes, and that's on the edges or on the ends, on the tails. Chi-square we talked about makes a comparison between what you get and what you expect. Did you get in the neighborhood of what you expect, or did you get significantly more or less than you expected? So again, we have two different kinds of values. We have observed values and we have expected values, what you would expect. Okay. And that's a pretty good umbrella for the formatting content. You can ask specific questions if you'd like, and I will answer your specific questions to some degree. Any other specific questions? Have I done a great job in making everyone equally unhappy? As soon as you log off, the questions are going to come. I understand it perfectly now, but as soon as you hit that off button, oh no, it all went with the power. Okay, a foggy area.
It's the calculated critical value. And I remember doing it. I can go back and
The question was about some confusion between calculated and critical values. And again, that's kind of old school. It's kind of pre-SPSS or apart from SPSS. You crank out a t-value according to a messy formula that we never used. We got the same t-value from SPSS, but if you crank out a t-value, the meaning of that t-value depends how that compares with the critical value. The critical value is the number from the table. It's kind of your target. The critical value is the border, the boundary between crossing from not being significant to significant. So if your calculated t-value, t equals 4.16 or something, if that's higher than the number from the table, which is the critical value, then you've got a significant difference. A t-test looks to determine if there's a significant difference between two things. An ANOVA looks to see if there's a significant difference between two or more things. A chi-square looks to see if there's a significant difference between two things, but the two things are what you get and what you expect. If you dig way back, a correlation looks to see if there's a significant relationship. That means if you go up in one, do you tend to be up in the other, or vice versa? And then let's go back and just kind of spell it again, because we talked about correlations again back at the first part of the course. A correlation is a relationship between two variables. A t-test looks for a difference between two groups. A correlation looks for a relationship between two variables, like SAT and ACT. A t-test looks to see if there's a significant difference between two groups, like the students in Miss Smith's class and the students in Miss Jones' class. Those are groups. T-test deals with groups. ANOVA deals with groups.
ANOVA is a group, but it's a group both between and within.
Well, the ANOVA makes a comparison between groups, but you've got two different kinds of variables and, two different kinds of degrees of freedom than variances. But you're still comparing between groups. Yep. Yeah, you're not comparing variances or degrees of freedom. You're comparing scores between groups, or some kind of measures between this group and that group and another group, maybe. Or 5 different groups for an ANOVA if you want to. I don't want to do that. Some of you were very brave and wrote up some of those really messy ANOVAs where you had 4 or 5 groups. That's fine. Again, you get some extra points for degree of difficulty there.
I remember about the degrees of freedom, between groups and within groups. I don't remember about two different
Yeah, the comment was made remembering about how to figure degrees of freedom the 2 different ways, between groups and within groups. But you don't remember you're doing your initial, that way. Yeah, they like that, yeah. The thing is, I don't remember how to figure the variance. You don't have to, because the SPSS takes all the consideration when it spits out the output. I'm not going to ask you the variance either ways, yeah. Yeah, that would not be fair game. The question was, will the write-ups be graded by the, I will get to the rate. I've gotten to some of the write-ups, haven't gotten to some of the write-ups. I will try to do that in pretty short order. And if I am behind, and I know I am behind on some email responses, if you want to ask me something again that I may not have answered, feel free to ask me again. And keep in mind, I still ask you to let me know when you viewed the videos. And I've got some really old responses saying you viewed such and such video, and I've not recorded or responded to that because that just, quite honestly, that's not a real high priority with. It's just something I like to keep track of on the side. Anything else? The last session, there are 2 more sessions after this. The next session is when you choose to take the final exam, and the last session will be a debriefing session. Yes, the debriefing session will consist of a couple things. It'll consist of, I will go over the final exam, and I will not record that part for reasons I've explained already. But I will do some debriefing in terms of getting some feedback from you, and again, come with, it's not absolutely, I don't want to say this, I don't want to say it's not important. You don't have to come, but there wouldn't be any penalty if it would be to your benefit to participate, especially since there's another course, but there's not going to be any new information. It's just kind of a closure sort of session to where we kind of, recap what we think we should know, and you to give me feedback. I'm hoping most of you have already done the online evaluation, And I won't see that for a while. Matter of fact, I won't see that until after I plan the next time I do this course. So if there are things that you can say to help me, then let me know, because as I mentioned, a lot of the reason I do a lot of stuff the way I do is because students told me it would be helpful to do it this way. And sometimes I think, sometimes I'll do something students think will tell me will be helpful, and I'll find out the next week will say, that wasn't helpful at all. You need to go back to such and such. So just let me know this thing. So the last session is supposed to be mutually beneficial. So after this, there will be 2 more sessions, just 1 more live session. And I'll record the discussion part, but I won't record the going over the final part. Anything else? So you know when to log on and take the final, and you know how to contact me if and when you have questions. So our next session will be not collective, but the session after that will be collective, and that'll be the last one of the course.